Hello, I'm here at Daventry Radio. I am with Councillor Chris Long to talk about the issues affecting Daventry going into this local election. Councillor Long, thank you very much.
Great pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
We'll start off with the canal arm, because I think it's a big thing, and the waterside development as well.
Yeah.
It's a big thing, it's attracted praise and, as you'll know, criticism as well.
Yes.
Is the canal arm essential for Daventry's development?
I wouldn't suggest that it's essential for Daventry's development. What is essential for Daventry's development is in fact the Daventry Link Road. The reason that the Link Road is essential is that when the Churchfields development was brought to before the planning inspector some 8-9 years ago, so I think probably about that sort of time, he actually did a review of the area, he took a look and he said that he would decline the development based on the fact that the number of properties involved, the volume of traffic which would need to access both the A5 and the A45 towards Northampton and the M1 was too great at that present in time before you even added anything, and that he wasn't prepared to grant planning applications until such time that that problem was sorted out. The cost of building that road is something like £56 million. Certainly you'll be aware of the financial hiatus that we had in the years 2008 to 2010, which we still have today. So raising £55 million is not the easiest thing to do, especially when you consider the perilous financial position that the county council is in at the moment. I stress that here in Daventry we are well balanced, we are prudent, we don't have that problem, but the county council does. So for some considerable period of time, the development of Daventry has been put on hold, and it's been put on hold because we would not have got planning, would not have had planning permission to actually continue to build. The agreement of the county council to take on board the construction of the Daventry Link Road, which I prefer to call the umbilical cord for Daventry, because the umbilical cord is the lifeline for New Daventry. First of all, it will take the stopper out of the bottle as far as planning applications are concerned. The one prime reason for a planning inspector to turn down applications has been removed. I suspect over the coming months we'll be in a position whereby we will receive a number of applications for planning, probably a review back to the Churchfields site again where there's anything up to 4,000 properties potentially to be built. The point with that is that the increase or the building of those properties will increase the residency here in Daventry quite considerably. If you say 2 people per house, 4,000 properties, 8 to 10,000 new people. If you look at the shopping centre, the big retailers who we would love to attract into Daventry demand, and it's not request, they demand that there is a very specific footfall to open up a new store, and those stores have to be certain distances away from their existing stores. So of course, being located near to Northampton, Rugby, Milton Keynes, Coventry, you have to have the sort of growth that we're looking for to make it worth their while. With the Link Road now being built, it's obvious it's being built, you drive past, you can see it now being produced. With the planning applications which will come in, developers will see the opportunity to bring retail in. With that, you will land up with people spending their money, where at the present moment Daventry is a dormitory town, and they usually spend their money where they work, especially when it comes to everyday shopping, so they don't spend it here. If by having a bigger workforce we can attract more high-tech companies here into Daventry, then we'll be in a position whereby people will be able to be born and educated here because of the new school offering we have with the UTC and the new schools that are planned. They'll be able to work here because there will be new companies here. Hopefully they'll then spend their money because of the new retail facilities which will come, and the ones that the plans are already here. So from that point of view, that's how you will see Daventry grow. That's the important part for the growth. The question you asked, and I will return to it and I will take it head on, is the water space essential? No, it's not essential, but it is another factor which will encourage people here. To give you my views on that subject, which I'm sure will be the next question if I don't give them anyway, I have three opinions, and it depends where you look. First of all, I'm the elected council, or one of the elected councillors for Abbey North. In that respect, I'm expected in what I do to represent the views of the residents who vote for me. And I've been the councillor up there for the last 10 years. I have to be honest and say, if I read the papers, the local paper in particular, what I see reflected in there in terms of objections to the water space is not what I receive in terms of correspondence from the residents of Abbey North, which is my prime concern. I probably, and after this interview, this statement will probably be completely reversed because I should probably be totally inundated with complaints. But as far as Abbey North residents are concerned, they have far more day-to-day problems that they're asking me to sort out. And I can be honest with you, and I can turn around and say, I probably have nothing more over a period of time than 4 or 5 letters / emails of complaint saying we would like you to represent us and we don't want it. Whenever I make a presentation to council, in my role as an elected councillor, I will try to give a balanced view, and I will try to ensure that even a minority view is actually heard, that there are objectors to it. So I have one position as an elected councillor. From the point of view of the role that I hold, the position I hold at Daventry, which is resources portfolio holder, which means I'm responsible for the oversight of the finance, not only for Daventry, but the whole of the 257 square miles of Daventry district, out as far as Malden Park. I have to take a look at the fact, as I mentioned earlier on, Daventry has got a balanced budget, a medium-term financial plan. But although we have a healthy position at this moment in time, what we have to remember is that the government as such, year on year, are reducing the government grants. Now the government grants come to help us run the council. There are 2 major funds within the council. One is the revenue account, which is the account that we use for the day-to-day running of the council, the provision of services, etc., such as waste. We also then have the capital account, which is the one which is used for building capital projects. The money that we get from government generally is used for the revenue account. As I say, year on year, we've been losing about something in the order of 10% from the government, which, if residents want the services that we currently provide to be continued, we have to find the money to do that from somewhere. Now, there's 2 potential ways in which the council can raise its funds. One is through council tax. Having said that, the government have over the last few years limited the amount of money that you can raise council tax. This year the maximum was £5 for the year, which effectively is what Daventry did. I would remind people at the moment though that of all the council tax they pay, only 9% of the total actually is retained here in Daventry. The other 91% either goes to the county for county services or to the Police and Crime Commissioner. So we have to do a lot with 9%. We have to be very prudent, we have to be very careful, and we have to find additional ways. We have to be innovative in raising the funds to run the authority. Now, there are 2 ways in which we can do that. One, if you get additional growth of housing, then there will be additional council tax. Now, from that point of view, yes, you'll get additional council tax, but you have to provide additional services as well. So, from that point of view, it's not all a big plus gain. The second part to it is that we do raise taxes in some of the locally retained money from NNDR. An NDR, to give explanation, is basically business rates. We only have a limited retention of that. The government are looking to try to do that. But if you combine the business rates plus the addition of new houses, That's where we have an additional source of income. It won't grow, but what it will do, it will begin to compensate for the loss of grants that we're getting from government. This year we budgeted 10%, in fact we lost 16%. If my memory serves me well, next year we will lose a further 14%, and the 2 following years after that, 10% and 10%. So by the time we get to the end of that period, we will virtually be getting no government grant whatsoever, and we have to continue to be innovative. From that point of view, if you look at the if you look at the Churchfield development or any development, we could get an increase in council tax from that. If as such the water space is developed with retail, leisure, etc., yes, it becomes a facility for local people, but at the end of the day, it's also wearing my resources hat. It's another source of income which enables us to balance the budgets, to deliver the services that we so want to continue to deliver unaffected. It's a very difficult balancing act, but we do try, and this will be the way of doing it. My third opinion is that as a private individual. And I have to make it very clear that my opinion as a private individual takes a very long step backwards to the other 2 roles I have to fulfil. My attitude as an individual is that providing any development like that does not weigh on the public purse, which is paid for by the local residents. I would be glad to see Daventry grow. I moved here in 1973. I've been here now 40 odd years. I'm still not a local yet, but I'll be there eventually. But during that period of time, if I go back to 1973, we probably had a better retail offering in the town centre. It was just after Bowen Square was built than we do today. We had some of the big chains which now only have out-of-town stores, but we had them here in Daventry. I want to see those come back again. So I haven't deflected away from answering directly, but I have to take 3 completely different viewpoints. The latter one is a personal opinion which I dispel. The most important one is the one that I have to take on behalf of the residents who elect me to represent them, and that's what I will always do. I have a record of not always supporting the district council and the leadership. My attitude is for that reason. At the end of the day, residents elect me to vote on their behalf in the way they ask me to do, and that's what I will always do, regardless of what the outcome of that is.
One point to pick up from that is mentioning the cuts from the government, the funding from the government is being cut, which you mentioned business rates, the importance of raising more in business rates. Does that make the retail and housing developments in Daventry essential, and do we have to wait for the link road first before those can go ahead?
I wouldn't say it's essential. They will contribute. If you look at the way Daventry District Council financed itself until just before the financial hiatus of 2008, generally, by having sold land, etc., it has had large capital reserves of about £30 million. And that, to all intents and purposes, was invested safely through building societies, banks. Yes, we did get involved with the Icelandic bank problems, but interestingly enough, we've just had another payment out of that, and that virtually should be the end of it. But that means that over the period of time, we will have had back, including interest, all the money that was potentially at risk. So that is out of the way. But if you were to take 30 million and you were to say the money at that period of time was invested at 5-6%, that meant that you were generating about £1.8 million in revenue income. Now I have to make it very clear that there are 2 types of income, revenue and capital. You can spend capital on capital projects. You cannot spend capital to run the council. You can spend money, the revenue money, to run the council, but if you have any residual revenue, you can actually contribute effectively towards capital projects. So we're in a position to answer your question. Is the new buildings, etc., essential? The answer is no, because Daventry has done after the financial hiatus, interest rates, as everybody will well know, dropped from 6% to 0.5%. Well, if you take a look at 0.5% of 30 million instead of 6%, you suddenly realise there's about 1.5 million pounds black hole develops in your accounting. That caused problems. Now, Daventry had to take a lot of steps to overcome that problem. But not only did it have to overcome the problem at that time, what it actually had to do was to look at a different way in which effectively it was going to finance itself ongoing. This was before the government started cutting back on the grants, etc. And in fact, if you look around, Daventry does in fact own shops, it owns factories. In fact, two of the last big factories to be built here actually were built with capital from Daventry District Council, and because it was capital money, the value is retained within the building, but the rental of those buildings comes back into the revenue account. So we're now in a position where, over a period of time, we have changed from being what I refer to as casino accounting, i.e. you are making money out of investing. We're now back into a position where everything is much more secure. The money is tied up in property, which is secure. It brings in a continual revenue stream. And on that particular basis, that's how we've got to having a balanced budget today. To answer your question, the link road is important to open up the new growth of Daventry. Of course, everything that comes will contribute financially towards the benefit of the town, etc. Daventry, if Daventry wasn't to get the growth, I think that it would be left well behind the places around us. If you look at sort of the growth in Banbury, the new shopping complex in Rugby, the new ones that are going to be built out on the A45, the other side of Northampton. If we don't get the link road, the umbilical cord, and that doesn't happen, Daventry won't get the growth. We need the growth really to become a much more regional player than we have been. And I think that what we have to equally realise is that Daventry is almost now the northern part of the south of England. The wave of people have moved out. By going round knocking doors, as we do regularly, especially at this moment in time, we're finding a lot of people coming up and living in the Daventry area, coming up from London and the south east, Surrey, Berkshire. Down there, they're capital rich. They have houses worth £750,000 and above. But they probably struggle with pensions and their actual day-to-day money. Coming up here, they can probably, where they perhaps had a 4-bedroom property down in the south of England, they can buy a 4/5-bedroom property up here, sell them down there, let's say for £750,000, buy one up here for £500,000, and the problems that they have with day-to-day money and their pensions is completely dealt with because of the sale of what we have down there. Equally, people who are still of working age, actually, if you certainly look at the professions of the legal profession, the financial profession, etc., many of the companies where they were once upon a time only based in London are now based in Birmingham. By living here, you can commute as easily to Birmingham as you can to London, so you have different job opportunities while still living in a relatively pleasant, relatively rural community.
Is Daventry then experiencing what Northampton experienced in, say, the 60s and the 70s with regards to people moving up from London and the expansion?
I think you're in a position whereby the economic changes that took place in 2008, 2010, I know I go back to that, but it was such a major change for everybody. And let's be honest, we really haven't overcome all of the problems that were created then, even now. So I think people have benefit because of the demand for property in London, and demand leads to higher prices. Ultimately, people have made their money in retaining their property. In doing so, they are now seeking ways of actually releasing the equity in that property to actually enjoy the rest of their lives. The question you asked, are we seeing now what Northampton saw? No, I think things are slightly different now. I think the world is a far different place. And I was also the county councillor for Daventry West from 2009 to 2013. During that period of time, I chaired Northampton County Council's Finance Scrutiny Committee with responsibility for the finance for the area, for the county. And even during that period, we were still seeing people moving up from London. It's been a continual flow, because not always because they want to. I think the economic pressures have pushed them this way. And if you look at the number of people coming to settle in the area, and I mean, if you look here in Daventry in particular, we have a large Polish community, all of whom are extremely welcome. They're extremely nice people. They work extremely hard. But that is something that we didn't have 10 years ago. And this is what I mean by how circumstances are changing. The world is a different place.
Going back to the canal arm and financing, and you mentioned how capital funding works as opposed to revenue funding.
Yeah.
What do you say to those who say, actually, Daventry Town Centre needs a lick of paint, it needs a bit of money put into it?
It does. I don't disagree. I don't disagree with the fact that the town centre, in fact, it looks run down. There's no doubt about that. I think the thing you have to remember, and this is where some degree of knowledge of retail comes into it, and we're not always masters of our own destiny, because the retailers themselves actually can demand quite significant, though they have significant requirements to move into a town. If you look at the plan that is being laid out for the new development, which will take place down on the bottom of Sheaf Street and down there, what today's retailers in fact are asking for is very large boxes. Literally nothing in them, just a very large box. We would probably call them almost like a warehouse, but they want boxes that effectively they can be flexible with. They can put mezzanine floors in. They can divide, subdivide, etc., because that's the nature of today's retailing. The problem that we have in Daventry High Street is actually the type of property that we actually have. If you wanted to bring in some of the bigger people, they'll never move into Daventry High Street, purely because the shops that we have, or the shop facilities we have, don't meet their requirements. If you actually take a look at, let's say, Market Harbour, for example, they have a really good mixture of the two. They have the building of the type of property that the retailers want on the outskirts of Market Harbour, yet the centre of Market Harbour, with the older type properties, they've actually turned into smaller bespoke shops, one-offs that they're not national chains, they are just one-offs. Now, we started to do that some years ago, and that's what you have that you actually have in Sheaf Street at this present moment in time. If you look at the old photographs of when the lorries used to drive up there, you wonder how they ever got up there, bearing in mind as a pedestrian precinct how it's small now. To answer your question, the town centre does need a really good tidy up. I think the point being, though, is that until you have the larger retailers here, you are not, well, two things. First of all, until you get the larger retailers here, you're not going to get people coming here for the sort of next M&S type products, because we don't have that sort of thing. And you probably require that sort of draw and attraction to make it a viable proposition for the more bespoke shops. So I think the two go hand in hand. You need one area where you are possibly going to bring in. I only use those companies as examples because they're nationally known. I'm not suggesting that there's any chance of them coming here. But that type of property, we need the type that we're actually going to have the shops, the ones we've planned to build. I think you will actually see the redevelopment of the other town centre as part and parcel of it. As more people come here, it becomes more profitable for the smaller shops to be open here alongside the bigger shops. Then you'll see it grow. And on another topical subject, which is to do with the town's market, again, when I came here in '73, it was a big market on the market square, considerably bigger than it is today. Today's one is only a shadow of its former self. I think that possibly might be down to the days it currently operates, because it's usually open when the vast majority of people are at work, which is probably not the right way to get people here. But I think if you can get the bigger retailers in and provide them with the facilities that they demand of us, not want, they demand if they're going to come, that will bring the people in. People will want to look around the rest of Daventry, so it becomes more profitable for the smaller people. And equally, I do believe if we do that, it will actually be the lifeblood of regenerating Daventry's market. We are a market town. And the whole lot flows together, but it still comes back at the end of the day to building the umbilical cord, because without that, without the growth of housing and everything else, none of the rest of it can happen. That's how vital the Daventry Link Road is.
Eastern Way, I've heard concerns with regards to the Waterside project and the canal, that will be built on and lost. What do you say to that?
There are plans put forward for that, but they are at this present moment in time plans. If you take a look at how long this has been going on, I mean, the original plans for this must have come up 2006, something like that. So from that point of view, I think that all this has got to be brought up to date. We've got to see what's going to happen, what fits, because we're in a position whereby time has moved on, demands have changed. I mean, if you take a look at what was originally planned for the shopping centre before all this started, there were certain types of products that you would normally at that stage seen in retail shops, i.e. white goods, etc., etc. You don't get white goods sales shops any longer. That's disappeared during that period of time. So you're in a position whereby you might go to an out-of-town retailer, but more likely you'll go on the internet and buy it from there. The whole thing has changed. The world doesn't stop because we had a financial hiatus. So the point is, the whole thing needs to be checked to make sure that what we are offering now is what it might have been what was right then. Whether it's right now is another matter. We still have to sort that one through.
Tourism, building the canal, it's been said that it could be, not just the canal, the boat lift, of course, is going to be part of it. It's been said that it could be more popular than the Falkirk Wheel, it'll bring people in. I spoke to Ken Ritchie, who's obviously standing for Labour against yourself, who suggested that there's no evidence for the tourists that could come in. What do you make of that?
As with any project, you have to take a look at what has been successful out there, whether it's the Falkirk Wheel or whatever. And it's a matter of opinion. I mean, I've not seen the Falkirk Wheel other than in television programmes, but I'm interested in I'm interested in canals purely having had holidays on canals. But the Falkirk Wheel fulfills a particularly important role where it is, the effect of joining. So from that point of view, I see that as not only being a tourist attraction, but an attraction which actually has a function. With the potential of what we're doing here, because it's going to be the end would be the marina, as such, it's not a joining operation between two canals on a through place. If you take a look at what is really interesting, I don't know whether you go to the Castle Centre in Banbury, but the Castle Centre in Banbury is actually literally by the side of the canal over there. And it's great because you have parking for all the boats. The boats are on the Oxford Canal. I think the vast majority of them are holiday makers, etc. And they will stop off, they'll do their shopping, and they'll continue to move on. But there is a purpose. Whether canal boat owners would want to come into a dead end, a dead end marina and go back again, I'm not experienced enough to make that judgment. It's not my sphere of excellence. I have to listen to what people with more knowledge than I have, and I'm not talking about councillors, I'm talking about leisure experts and canal experts say that will happen. In the same way I listen to my residents, I listen to those people who do this for a living. I get very little correspondence on the subject of the canal, full stop. I have people who will stop me in the street. I live here. My usual trip to the town takes an hour and a quarter, where once upon a time it took 15 minutes. But I do listen to people. I would suggest that I've had 4 or 5 emails of saying, We are Abbey North residents. We don't support the canal arm. Will you please convey, when you're doing whatever you're doing, please will you bear this in mind and convey that forward, that there are people who don't do it. I have people who say to me, yeah, I support it, I want to see a change, I want to see the new leisure complex, etc., etc. But if I were to do a comparison with the swamp of emails that I had when we had problems with enterprise, with litter collecting, with grass cutting, I was absolutely, my emails, my letters were swamped for week after week after week with complaints. If you want to do a comparison between that, which was affecting people on a day-by-day basis, and the very small number of correspondence that I get with that, that is the magnitude of how Abbey North residents at this moment in time have involved me in their comments. I think the thing is that those people, generally, those people who object to the canal are very vociferous, and Councillor Wendy Randall is part of this. Wendy does a great job for the people of the Grange and for Daventry in raising these particular issues. What it's necessary to do, though, is that not everybody shares those views. Other residents actually have far more pressing day-to-day problems in their own parts of their ward, which if you give me a chance, I will go on to develop.
Yeah.
Because that affects them day to day. This currently doesn't yet affect them at all, and they need to deal with some of the other problems that we have more urgently.
Mulberry Place,
Yep.
the cinema, people obviously say they want the cinema.
Yep.
I read that the plans have been put on hold because of commercial viability.
Yep. It's true.
Can you guarantee that the water space in the canal will be commercially viable, but the cinema at the moment, and Mulberry Place in larger, isn't at the moment?
We're in a position whereby, as I say, the world has changed. The type of retail requirement is different. Mulberry Place, you're absolutely right, is on hold for this present moment in time. It doesn't say it won't happen, but it isn't right and proper in terms of development at this moment in time. Bear in mind that this is not a decision of Daventry District Council. Any development, whilst it can be fostered by Daventry District Council, will depend upon whether or not you can find a developer who in fact is prepared to build these things. Henry Boot are the developer who we've worked with for a period of time, who would certainly are the people who will be have made the presentation for the items which currently are up for proposal, which hopefully will continue later this year. And what they're saying is that they will not start building any commercial retail activity until such times that they can guarantee, I believe it's something like 70% let buildings. They won't even start building it because obviously they're not going to build a shopping centre and have that on their hands. The amount of money involved is so high, they can't afford to do it. So the point I need to get over to you with this is that the decision to go forward or not go forward doesn't solely lie in the hands of Daventry District Council. It's whether or not a developer feels that he can get the number of lettings he needs if he commits. And let's take it. Be honest, we're talking 40 or 50 million pounds here. We're not talking about small monies. So from their point of view, A, they've got to be certain that they will get those lettings, and to a degree, they've also got to do a little bit of crystal ball gazing in as much as what is retail going to be in 10 years, 20 years? Because if you're going to build this isn't going to be here for the next 20 years, it's going to be here for the next 30 years. Look at Bowen Square. It was built when I came here in 73. It needs renovating again, but it's still there. That's the sort of timescale we have. So they've got to be absolutely certain of the type of how retail is going to grow. I mean, once upon a time, if somebody had come up with the idea of Argos-type catalogue showrooms, people would have laughed. Argos is now a very good business. There are other people, but it's a different type of store to the one that you would have had 10 or 20 years ago. So somebody has got to do this crystal ball gazing. Take a look at the internet. We didn't have the internet 20 years ago. Is there going to be something else that's going to come along? Are people going to shop in a completely different way from there. I mean, we're in a position where the big supermarkets, up until 5 years ago, were still trying to build the mega stores. They've now mothballed so many of them because that isn't what people want. People's shopping habits have changed, where once upon a time they would do a once a week shop. Now they'll probably shop in a Tesco's Metro or the equivalent 2 or 3 times a week, and not with one big shop. It's a continual change. We're not, whatever we do now may not be the way we do it tomorrow. So people have got to be certain. So to bring you back to the point is that what development takes place isn't totally within the behest of Daventry District Council. It can promote it, but you've still got to have a developer come along, and the developer will always turn around and say, I will build it when I have guaranteed this number of lettings and these number of key stakeholders. So, you know, it isn't just what we want to do, it's actually what they allow us to do.
Moving on to an issue in Abbey North. Yeah. I had a question from a resident about parking, because I know parking is a bit of an issue.
It is.
He was referring really to Ken Ritchie's leaflet, where he mentions about dealing with parking problems or creating more parking areas. And the question was, what would he do to deal with the parking issue of estates already built?
Yeah.
What do you make of that? What did you say to that?
Okay. The big problem that we all have, and it's not just Daventry, it's everywhere, was that the government decided, in their wisdom, or lack of, to have national planning which said that new properties would have 1.6 car spaces per house. And I generally believe that the idea of this was actually to try to force people to use public transport. Well, if you live in the London conurbation or the area down there where public services are really good, trains run every 10 minutes or whatever, that might be fine. But when you live in a rural community like Daventry, and whilst I wouldn't criticise the bus services considerably better than it was, it's not like being in London. Therefore, everybody has cars. We're in a position, in fact, I've been out this morning, if I can identify one area where there is a particular problem, which effectively is the lower end of the Headlands. And this is where we're talking about Highfield Road, Elizabeth Road, Dryden, and around there. And we're in a position whereby people don't, quite simply, have more cars, and in some instances they have vans, etc., than there is actual parking space. And in those areas there is actually a potential for resolution, providing, and it's not a district council issue, it's a county council issue, if the county council are prepared to buy the bullet and deal with it. If you look at the buildings that are built today, or the estates, they try to get the maximum amount of properties into an acre, because that's where they make their money. Therefore, you don't find a great deal of spare space. If you come down onto the Headlands, where it was built perhaps in the mid-50s, 60s, there is a lot of grass verges, there is a lot of green areas, where, to be honest, for a small amount of money, you could still leave a good path that people can generally use, including invalided people, blind people, etc. And this is the danger, of course, with cars parked on the pavement at the moment. But you could take out the green spaces. You could put in, to all intents and purposes, a herringbone effect type parking. So the cars would go in forward, and they would go far enough forward, and you could actually then, you could get more cars in. You would keep the road clear. And the one thing that worries me, we had an issue about a year ago where an emergency vehicle was trying to get to an emergency call, and they had to stop on the Headlands, and they had to move a vehicle because of the inconsiderate way it was parked. Now, fortunately, in this particular instance, it wasn't a life and death matter. Had it have been so, where time was absolutely critical, the 1 or 2 minutes it took to deal with this could have been enough to save somebody's life. So from that point of view, on the Headlands, there is a parking problem. There is a way of resolving it on those roads where you've got the big green spaces. If you go further up, there isn't quite so much green space, but there is still grass verges. You could almost put semi-laybys into them, so people moved over far enough that you could get vehicles through. And bear in mind that up there also you have to be in a position where you get buses through because it's part of the service bus route. So that's the headlands part of it. If you go to Middlemore, let's talk about Middlemore from that point of view. There are some of the problems up there, and it does come back to the Bellway properties actually have a better parking area. The Bellway were much more considerate, and you don't get quite the same problem at that end, which is the western end of Middlemore. What you do find though is that you actually have houses where people do have drives, usually back drives or garages, but actually they choose not to use them. They use them for storage, and they leave the cars on the road. Therefore, you are landing up with more vehicles there than was originally planned. I think one of the other problems up there, and it was something I'm absolutely sure was not taken into account when it was designed, was that a lot of the houses were actually designed as family properties. Economics have changed. We have buy-to-lets. And some of the properties actually have now become houses of multiple occupation, where instead of a family of 4, you've probably got 5 or 6 adults living there, sharing room share, etc., etc. So instead of what would have been 2 cars, you've possibly got 6 cars or more. And again, when all this was envisaged by the planners, none of this actually happened. So therefore, you are now trying to deal with a problem which was not envisaged and probably didn't even exist when that came through. If we could encourage residents to actually use their drives, to use their garages for their cars, that would ease matters. You certainly don't have the same amount of space up there as you have on the headlands to actually make the sort of herringbone type effects. That isn't so easy. We're in a position where, at this present moment in time, we are seeking to get the roads on Middlemore adopted, because bearing in mind at this moment in time, none of the roads on Middlemore are adopted. Because they're not adopted, there is no road traffic orders in place. So therefore, you can't put yellow lines down, you can't put yellow or white lines down. Equally, nobody will say that that is totally effective anyway. So the position that we're in where that is concerned is that I've been pushing Daventry District Council, as the records will prove, to try to get the roadworks completed. This is the infrastructure roadworks. But that isn't always as easy as it sounds. First of all, with roads, certainly before they're adopted, you need to have them top dressed and you need the paths completed and finished. What actually happens though is that the county council, who will be the adopters, will come along and they will want to do a survey of the construction of the roads, because obviously when they adopt the road, the cost of maintaining that then falls on the public purse, and they do not want to take on anything which is less than the standards they require. So first of all, they will take a look at an estate where they want to adopt a road. It will be necessary for them to do a survey of that road, and they will ask for remedial work, whether drop curbs are in the wrong place, they're not there at all. They'll tell the authority what's needed doing. The authority will then get on and make those changes. During that period of time, before they will adopt the road also, they need certification from Anglian Water. There is no problems with the drains, the sewers, etc. When all that's in place, then and only then will adoption take place. Until then, the roads remain the property of the developer. It is therefore the developer's stage, which it is at the moment, to make sure the roads are swept, kept clean, lighting is changed, etc., etc. So we're in that position at the moment. As far as the final infrastructure is concerned, I put a white paper through the strategy group to merge 2 council budgets. Because of the length of time that Middlemore has been being built, there's been the need to have 2 construction budgets, one for the first part, one for the second. I put to the strategy group the need to merge these, and once merged, to get on and actually do the completion of the roadworks up there. Strategy group actually passed it, and it will now go to Daventry's full council in May. County Highways have done their survey on the Middlemore roads. We know what needs doing. We're now into the new financial year. Money is not the problem in doing it. Once the rectification work has been done as required, the top dressing will be done during that period of time, the drains will be certified, and the likelihood is that it will be the county council which will do all the work, because if they do the work, they're very unlikely to reject it as not appropriate for adoption.
Another issue with regards to Middlemore is the school, which again I think goes back to the county council.
I campaigned on Middlemore for 5 years to get the school. Middlemore residents are very lucky. They have a very active Middlemore Residents Association, and I have worked very closely with both their secretary and their chairman. When Middlemore was first developed, there was a plan for a single form entry primary school. And this was agreed by the county council and supported by the district council, but as a school, you're quite right, it is a county council matter, but Daventry District Council had allocated land on Middlemore for this school. That was their contribution, the value of the land. During that period of time, the county council changed its build programme to the fact that it stopped building single form entry schools and only said it would build two form entry schools. The principle being is that to have the two form entry schools doesn't cost twice the value of the single. It's about 50% more, and it was a way of saving money. And the problem is that the land which Daventry District Council allocated to build the school was only sufficiently large to actually take a single form entry. Now, that in itself wasn't a problem, because it would have been possible to have found another piece of land, one of the latter developments, to actually deal with that. But the county council actually said, no, sorry, you've got another development coming forward which will be on Monksmoor. We'll actually build a school on Monksmoor, and that will actually cater both for Middlemore and Monksmoor. So we campaigned vigorously, and at that particular stage, rather than the county council doing it, Chris Heaton-Harris, who is our MP, and I got involved in it, and through Chris's work, we even had a sponsor lined up for a free school on Middlemore. We actually engaged with them, we did the research, the Residents Association did all the data gathering for them, and literally just at the time that we were going to put forward our presentation to the Department of Further Education, they suddenly turned around and said, no, the sponsor is no longer available to do that, unfortunately we can't do it. We did find, again through Chris Heaton-Harris, a second sponsor, but again DFE turned around and said, no, sorry, County Council will not sponsor this, even though Daventry District Council, who have supported it all the way through, made the land available, were happy for it to go through. The county said, no, sorry, it's going to be Monksmoor, that's all we're going to do, and no, we won't go any further than that. So for 5 years of hard work on my behalf, our MP's behalf, and I have to say, the absolutely dogged work of the Residents Association up there came to nothing. So it wasn't for the sake of trying, it wasn't for the sake of the work that we put in, it was the County Council who came along and scuppered all the plans, and unfortunately the residents of Middlemore today are the worse off for it, and I really do think the County Council made a grave mistake with that, and I've said it publicly, and I'm happy to say it publicly again.
Okay, I'll bring in a point I was going to bring a little bit later, but I'll bring it in now actually, to do with the County Council. Let's talk about unitary authorities.
Yep.
Is it time to take more services from the County Council and decision making and give it to Daventry District Council, Northampton Borough Council, etc.?
I think the answer to that question is that the subjects of devolution and all the rest of it, to be perfectly honest, at this moment in time is still very half-baked. You see that South Northamptonshire, who have shared a chief executive with Cherwell for some years now, as a money-saving exercise, they work extremely well together. They share a lot of, being adjoining authorities, they share a lot of areas. They've actually taken the decision that they would actually like to leave Northamptonshire and actually become part of Cherwell and around that area. Northamptonshire at this present time has a very specific problem, which effectively is its budget deficit. And at one particular stage, when they were trying to do the budgets for the year 2016-17, they were projecting ending up to a shortfall of about £85 million. Having been a county councillor and having been the chairman of their finance scrutiny, I know their finances well. And I also know the county extremely well. There is a real synergy between the district councils on the eastern side of Northamptonshire, Corby, Kettering, Wellingborough, East Northants. They have commonality in things they do, developments they have, and they don't actually have a great deal in common, with the greatest respect, with South Northants or Daventry. And there is talk about the possibility of there being a unitary involving those people bordering onto Cambridgeshire. There's a real distrust of the county council. There has been. I mean, county council, anybody listening from the county council won't like it, but the fact that the county council tried to enforce a unitary on the districts and boroughs of Northamptonshire some years ago never went down well. It's long been remembered, and in many instances that's where the distrust of the county council continues to come from. The borough council of Northamptonshire, the borough council actually is big enough to actually be a unitary on its own, and which leaves Daventry in a position where we have to decide what we want to do, what's best for us. Is it right to actually talk to Cherwell and to South Northants? Is it right that we should talk to Warwick or Rugby? Or at this present moment in time, everything is so in the melting pot that there is no hard and fast solution, plan or anything else like that. It's just a period of time of consultancy to effectively see what is the best way forward.
As you mentioned, there's a budget deficit in the county council. They're making their cutbacks. There were some closures, I believe, of some care homes or planned closures in Daventry. Because of the amount of council tax that goes to the county council, could some of that be retained, more of that be retained by the district council to keep those services in Daventry and the district open?
At the present moment, the way in which it works is you have layers of government. You've got central government, you've got county councils, district councils, and of course you've got the parish councils. And a lot of people actually don't understand the role of each of the... Well, I think we understand the role of central government. The county council is responsible for education, it's responsible for roads, it's responsible for care packages, it's responsible for libraries, it's responsible for the disposal of waste. Those are statutory obligations. In fact, the county council is equally responsible for the household waste recycling areas. People tend to think this is Daventry. In fact, that isn't. The district council is responsible for the collection of the taxes for the area. It's a tax revenue area. It's responsible for waste collection. It's strange that you have the county council responsible for getting rid of it and the district council responsible for collecting it. We have that level of responsibility, and then you have the town council, as the parish Daventry Town Council, which is their parish council, responsible for things like street furniture, allotments, and you can see how each is tiered down. But the bottom line to it is that whichever council you have, we actually all have the same customer. And in times that we're going through at the moment, the questions are now being asked: do you really need all four layers of administration to deliver to that? The chances are you don't need four, but the problem is you don't just need a single one either. But now is the time in which you need to take a look at it, decide what is best, and at this moment in time, that's what's going on. Everything's gone back in the melting pot. Let's see what is the better way of doing it from a financial economics point of view, and also to ensure that the residents get the best service. But to go back to the point, would it be better to hand things down? Under the present situation, there are statutory obligations given by government for certain councils to do certain things. If you want to do it differently, then you've almost got to as I say, put it back in the melting pot and let them turn around and say, this is what you can do, can't do, etc.
One point you touched upon there, which I was going to mention, was the bin collections.
Yep.
I believe the District Council has got to negotiate a new contract with Enterprise, I believe.
Enterprise is it's Enterprise AMI. AMI is the parent company of Enterprise. It was Enterprise when we took this out. We're now what are we? 4 years into a 7-year contract. Prior to that, Daventry District Council actually did all its own waste through an in-house. Through its own in-house operation, which was based at Contract House up on High March. But that period of time ago, again, in a way of trying to save money, to be effective, very encouraged by government so to do, we actually took a look at what was felt to be the most prudent way of providing the service. And we looked at all sorts of things, revamped in-house or working with service provider. And we went out through competitive tendering and we laid down the parameters of what needed doing. And ultimately, AMI, or Enterprise as it was, came up as the most competitive and the best offer that we could have. So we went down the route of working with them. We're now into a position whereby the initial contract was 7 years, we're 4 years into it. We're taking a look at it because in any of these negotiations, time is probably the biggest thing that you can possibly have, because you know these contracts are multi-million-pound contracts. You don't want to rush into them. You don't want to make mistakes, and therefore you've got to do it a bit at a time. Bear in mind, of course, that the AMI contract is a joint contract with Northampton Borough as well, and that was done to share costs, etc. before. We're taking a look at it now at this moment in time, and we are simply reviewing and saying, are we in future, are we going to continue with the service being done by an outside contractor? Would we better do it inside? What are the costs involved in doing all this? So we're still into the early part of that, and equally we're consulting with residents at this moment in time. There is a consultation going on as to actually what do they expect, what do they want. We want to listen to residents' views. One of the big things on waste that residents have always objected to is the red and the blue bins, where we collect recyclables or we collect paper. We all know that living in Daventry as high up as we are, we're in a position whereby the blue bins and the red bins go blown all over the place, the contents get spilt here, there and everywhere, and it contributes to the litter problems that we have. And residents have said to us for an awful long time, there's got to be a better way of doing this. Especially as we're asked to put their boxes out the night beforehand, and the wind blows overnight, and they're probably halfway up the road by the time the following morning comes around. So what we're actually looking to do is we're looking to consider changing the way in which we collect, the timescales, etc. Again, this is up for review at the moment. But one of the points within that would be to do away with the blue and red bins and actually incorporate the collection of the recyclables within a wheelie bin. We're in a position where we need to take a look at what we've done. How has it worked? Why has it worked that way? What other circumstances have changed? And at a particular moment in time, what is the right thing for Daventry to do? To continue what it's doing now? To go back to competitive tendering, to take it in? Again, we're in that position whereby we're looking at it, and certainly where point of residents' collections, etc., consulting with residents to find out what we want to do. We know they've told us all about the red bins and the blue bins, but it's really a matter of what service do you want. And we still have 3 years left to actually get that. So again, it's not an imminent problem.
A point I put to Ken, I'll put to you as well. Fear of crime, big issue. Mm-hmm. Does the district council do enough to help the police, etc., deal with crime within the district and the town?
I can only talk for me personally. I have a exceptionally good working relationship with Sam Dobbs, who is the local police sergeant, and I think the answer is you can never do enough. I mean, if you look at the some of the older estates, not necessarily just here but all over, the layouts etc. were never designed with crime in mind. In fact, if you look at the back runs and things like that, actually they helped harbour crime rather than anything else, because there were always escape mechanisms. If you look at the new estates, they are, the police and the various agencies are involved in the design and construction of these to make sure that policing is easy, there aren't rat runs or anything else like that. So from that point of view, taking on board their suggestions with regard to designing crime out wherever possible, that will always be taken on board. You have the subject of CCTV, which of course, we all know from television these days that it doesn't matter what crime happens, CCTV catches it somewhere or another, which gives us an indication of just how much we are actually reviewed during the course of our daily lives these days. We have CCTV here in Daventry. It's in a limited amount, but certainly that is a good way of monitoring what's going on within the town. So if I come back and answer your question, you can never do enough. You can never do enough to try to help people's security. I mean, if you talk to Sam at the moment, he will turn around and say that Daventry is probably one of the safest places to live. I mean, you look around, I think we've had 1 or 2 murders in about 8 or 9 years. And those have been very specifically related to particular instances. We don't have a lot of general crime in terms of personal injury. So we are very fortunate. It doesn't mean to say we don't need to do something about it to make sure we continue to be on top of it. But you also then have to take on board, we've already talked about cuts to revenue for the county council and the district council. If you look at the cuts that the police are having in terms of their financing, they themselves are extremely restricted. They probably would like to do considerably more than they do. They do the best they can within the resources they've got. And at a time when, as I say, government are trying to cut back and they're not putting additional money in, and I doubt that residents particularly want to see the cap taken off of the council tax, then I would suggest the police are probably doing the very best they can. But so long as we take on board their ideas of what they should do as and when new estates come up and new shopping centres, etc., then we are working towards that, and I would just encourage that to take place even more.
Does the district council do enough to foster community spirit? Does it offer the community enough to bring people together?
I think the answer to that is the way in which Daventry has been built doesn't help at all. If you take a look at Daventry is a series of little villages. And Middlemore is a village. Timkin is a village. Lang Farm is a little village. Monksmoor is going to become another little village. Drayton is another part of it. And they're all little villages which comprise the greater conurbation of Daventry. I think we made mistakes when some of them were designed, because if you look at Timkin, for example, Timkin simply doesn't have a social centre to it. It has Mayfield Sports Park, which I have to say is now being used a little bit more, but there's no pub, there is no shop, or anything else like that. It is just a village. And if you want to start building community, then to be perfectly honest, you need a central feature. It might be a school. It's got to be something that, to all intents and purposes, provides the hub of that area. I mean, if anything, with Middlemore, you at least do have the Middlemore Farm pub, and you've also got the shop. But there is no real communal area there. What would have been nice, of course, was had the school have been built to actually use that as almost as a community centre as well as, then you would have that. If you were to take it to Lang Farm doesn't have a shop, it doesn't have a pub. Okay, it's near to Ashby Fields, but it still doesn't have its own community heart. And my opinion is unless you build the community into the little village parts first, then you can't expect Daventry to have a particularly big heart. And this is something that goes back way before me, and something that I think for future developments, we really do need to take on board that if you want community spirit, you've actually got to build it in, and I don't think we have.
To touch upon that then, can the council do anything now to provide those services, or is it out of your control?
I wouldn't say it's out of the control. I mean, for example, if you take Middlemore, some of the community work is actually being done by the residents themselves. If you look at the Residents Association up there, they have litter pick days, they've got a fun day planned coming up. So in many ways, it's a matter of the Residents Associations helping the residents to help themselves. We used to have a residents. I live on Borough Hill, and we used to have Borough Hill Residents Association. It was formed after they had the rave on Borough Hill, and we've helped do various bits and pieces. But it's the problem comes is when there is no central cause to fight for. It's a small group of people that keep it running. And whatever you do, whatever you want for a community, it doesn't matter what a council does or what a local area does. Unless people are prepared to put the time and effort into it, it will never succeed. I mean, Daventry does as much. I think it does as much as it can. We certainly have the leisure centre here. That is now more thriving than it ever used to be. So we have that. There are clubs around, and there are things here for people to do. But in many ways, you've got to go and find them rather than being dropped in your just dropped in your lap.
Final question, and this touches on a much bigger issue. Would Daventry be worse off if Britain decided to leave the European Union?
I think to be perfectly honest, this is a very personal subject, and it's one that actually is causing a tremendous amount of confusion amongst people in general. Interestingly enough, and I will answer that directly, but I think the thing is that in the past, if we've ever had anything like this, residents tend to have default down to, well, what's the party I support doing, and I'll vote for them. When you consider where we are at the moment, we have some very strange bedfellows in either the in camp or the out camp, and so the principle of voting down party political lines isn't really an option. Not if you're going to look at it. I will be very honest, as I say, this is very much a personal vote, and I will do nothing to actually try to influence any of my residents. I will just simply put my view forward. And this is not a councillor's view, it's my personal view. I voted to join the European community when we did it, I think 13, 14, whatever it was. I voted it on a commercial basis that I actually wanted to join the European Free Trade Area, because I generally believed that in the United Kingdom would be better off within Europe from a point of view of trading, the locality. We wouldn't then be beholden to the American market, and of course at that particular stage the Chinese market wasn't quite what it is today. I didn't vote for to have common governance. I didn't vote to have a financial European Central Bank, and I think the problems during the financial hiatus proved that having a common bank and a common interest rate didn't help the problems at all. You're in a position whereby we here in the United Kingdom have the Bank of England, and the Bank of England was able to change and adjust the interest rates to what suited our economy to position us best in the world. If you take a look at Europe, it's such a large community that you have the hard economies of the North, Norway, the northern part of Europe, the industrial part of Northern Europe, and then you have the softer economies, the more tourism type economies of Spain, Italy, Greece, and you then have the third set of economies, which is the new communities, the old communist bloc. If you have one central bank, one central currency, you can only set one interest rate. And what suits the industrial north does not suit the south, as was proven with all the financial problems that came for Italy, Greece and Spain. What is required by the old communist bloc is something completely different again. So the principle of big is beautiful in this particular instance, I don't believe is right. I am happy that we live in a country where we choose our leaders. They're not appointed, we elect them. I don't want to be controlled by the bureaucrats of Europe. And on the scaremongering that's going on at the moment, which is effectively, well, if we come out of Europe, then I'm sorry, but we're not going to be able to trade. Do you really believe that Renault of France, Mercedes of Germany, Volkswagen are going to say, oh, you're out of Europe, I'm sorry, we're not going to deal with the United Kingdom when we are such a major part of there? No. That is scaremongering. It's a load of rubbish. As far as I'm concerned, I will vote to come out of Europe because I generally believe Britain will be stronger out of Europe. I believe the amount of money we pay in, we're a net contributor. And at the end of the day, we could spend that much better in this country. From a trade point of view, will it affect us? No. In fact, what it will probably do is mean we'll continue to trade with the rest of Europe, and we'll also pick up some of our old Commonwealth countries again, Canada, New Zealand, Australia. We'll talk, the Chinese is a new economy, as we will deal with the Americans. I think without being conceited, we're too important to many of those people to let us go. So that's scaremongering. I will vote to come out, but it has to be that it is a very, very personal decision, and that is me, not any party line.
Councillor Chris Long, thank you very much.
Great pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for your time.